I stared at my reflection in horror, at the fresh bruise on my left cheek, watching the skin swell, the dark bruise standing out like a sore thumb. But the instant I touched my finger to the contusion, I yelped in pain, gripping the counter with my fingers so tightly that they turned white. My lips trembled, tears welled in my eyes as a scream caught in my throat, begging for an escape. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't even scream. I couldn't even cry. I couldn't let him know. I thought to myself, I couldn't scare him, breathing through my mouth in short bursts. I tried to will the tears away. I had to be strong, not for myself, but for him. I was the only one he had, and if he saw me like this, as the broken shell of the person I used to be. No, I couldn't let that happen, but avoiding the bruise wasn't an option. I had to make the swelling go away before he woke up, so I balled up a few pieces of paper towels and placed the lump inside my mouth. The texture of the paper dried out the moisture inside my mouth immediately, making me want to gag. But I didn't give it time. I took the ice pack and placed it against my cheek immediately. This time, my scream of pain was muffled by the paper towels, and I instantly forgot the dryness. Trembling, I leaned my back against the bathroom door, closing my eyes shut tightly as I worked through the agony. "You little whore." My father's voice again sounded in my ears like a carnival drum, loud and grating as he held an empty bottle of whiskey in his hands, ready to strike. "Where is the money? I know you work at that stupid restaurant. Give me the money." Trembling in fear, I had told him that I didn't have any. And I hadn't been lying. I didn't have the money he was looking for. The money I had earned after grueling hours of hard work. But that hadn't stopped him from rudely searching my pockets, from going into my room to look under the mattress, not caring about invading my privacy. He had found it there. A total of $35 that I had gotten as tip from the restaurant after hours of standing on my feet. I had it hidden away inside the mattress cover, but it had fallen out when he had thrown everything on the floor. You fucking liar. I hadn't seen the bottle coming down on me, as I had shut my eyes tightly, fear making me freeze in place. But I had felt the impact of the glass on my cheek, heard it shatter on contact. But all I could do, as my mind went numb from the pain and black spots danced in front of my vision, was hope that it would have been the end of the torture. At least for tonight, and, thankfully, it had been. My father had thrown the half-broken bottle on the floor next to me, making me flinch away. And then he had strode out of the house, not even bothering to close the door behind him as he took my week's worth of savings with him. Scrambling to my feet, I paused for a second as the whole world spun in front of my eyes. And then I rushed to the front door, tripping over my own feet before reaching the door, shutting it tight and locking it securely. Our neighborhood wasn't ideal. It was located at the edge of the woods and was filled with people who would love to get their hands on a 17-year-old virgin. However, nowadays it felt like danger lived inside the house itself. I miss Mom. I would give anything to have her back. I wish she had taken me with her when she died. There was once a time when I wasn't this afraid to live inside my own house. Back when my mother had been alive. Back when my dad used to be a wonderful person who had taught me to dance on his feet in the living room and had cooked lunch for me and my mom on Sundays or taken us out to the amusement park. But that felt like ages ago. Mom was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. Right after she found out she was pregnant with my little brother, and everything changed overnight. Her treatment cost my dad a fortune, and he ended up in thousands of dollars in debt. But in the end, nothing had been able to save my mother. She died 6 years ago, and my once joyful father became a complete stranger overnight. He started gambling to pay off his debt, lost his job, and became even more addicted to alcohol and gambling. Now, he has nothing but a pile of addictions to deal with and debt collectors knocking at our door every other day. But he rarely comes home anymore, and even if he does, he comes for money. And if he doesn't get any money, then he takes all his frustration out on me, leaving me wishing for death every time. Why doesn't he just end it? Why not just end me and be done with it? For hundreds of times, I had thought about commit suicide to shut this damn miserable life, but I couldn't make it. The only reason I endured everything, the only reason I stopped myself from ending my life once and for all, is because of my little brother. My only ray of hope in this hellhole. Julian is only 5 years old and 12 years younger than me, but he is the dearest person in the world to me. We only have each other, and that was the reason why I was holding on to my sanity with sheer strength of will. I knew that the time would come one day when I would have crossed all my limits or my father would go a step too far. But before that, I needed to make sure Julian was old enough to fend for himself. He would have to learn to defend himself from our father's wrath, because I wouldn't be here to take the blow for him anymore. How long would it take? I am not sure. But hopefully Mom will pick me up then. Hey guys. I hope you like my new story. If you do, please drop me a comment. And a trigger warning will be in place as the first half of the story will contain bullying and other such content. But do not worry, the bullying will not be too severe. As a person who had been bullied pretty badly from kindergarten to high school, I did not want to go to extremes just for the sake of a story. It just felt wrong. But there will definitely be difficulties in Freya's life. So I hope you are aware of what comes as you read further. So a trigger warning is now in place. Hope you enjoy the story. Stay safe and happy reading. Enjoy. Freya's POV. Now, I opened my eyes slowly, letting the unshed tears roll down my cheeks before I turned back to the mirror once again to access the damage to my face. Nothing was broken, that much I was sure about. But the bruise was going to darken even further, until it was a blue-black spot that stood out even in the dark. I had to make sure to hide it. My skin looked as pale as a ghost, which made my blue eyes seem haunting. They seemed too big for my face, combined with my hollow-looking cheekbones. I pretty much looked like a walking, talking horror movie. My bangs covered most of my forehead, reaching past my brows and stopping just above my eyes. I knew I was no looker, but as the days went by, I had started to look even worse. My ink-black hair had once reached up to my waist in long, delicate curls, back when my mother had still been alive. But now, I've had cut them short to my ears to save myself so much unwanted trouble, because long hair was easier to grip, easier to pull, and they hurt like hell when uprooted in chunks. But it didn't matter how awful I looked. It wasn't like anyone would ever notice me, and neither did I want anyone to notice. I was a loner, a mere shadow at the back of the class, the one everyone was disgusted to even talk to, and I had no intention of changing that. I had no intention of coming into the limelight. Taking in a deep breath, I grabbed a concealer from the bathroom counter and put it on my face, concealing the dark red bruise that I received last night and the tiny blue ones that I didn't even keep count of. I then brushed my hair back and came out of the bathroom to dress in a faded green hoodie over a cry-mime-colored shirt with blue jeans that had nearly turned white from overuse. Walking downstairs on silent feet, I instinctively pulling the hood over my head so no one could grab my hair. Before remembering that my father had already left the house, taking off the hood when I reached the living area, I found the mess my father had left on the couch and 3 empty bottles of whiskey on the coffee table. So I began cleaning the place before Julian could come downstairs. Even when I had been ready to faint from the pain last night, I had managed to clear out the broken shards of glass so that Julian wouldn't step on any pieces accidentally when he came to the kitchen for a glass of water. Once I was done with cleaning, I began frying up 2 eggs and toasted a slice of bread on the same pan, so Julian could eat breakfast. I had 1 egg and a slice of bread while I was preparing Julian's meal. It was all that was left inside the fridge. Fortunately, meals were one thing I didn't have to worry about much, because the restaurant where I worked was kind enough to provide me leftovers. Even though the rice sometimes turned out stale or the food sometimes had the smell, it was still edible. It was enough to fill our tummies for one meal. "Is breakfast ready yet?" Julian asked as he came out of his room, his voice quiet. He was probably worried that our father was still inside the house, passed out on the couch. "Yes," I called back, wincing as my cheek stung, while putting his breakfast onto his plate and also getting the last of the orange juice out of the fridge. I checked to see if it was expired or not, and sighed in relief when I found it still fit for drinking. "Did Dad come home last night?" he asked quietly as he sat at the table, his big blue eyes sad yet curious. I only nodded my head as he ate silently, while I prepared his bag for school. I brought down my own bag and took out my wallet to see what was inside. My heart sank as I saw the $25 bills and a few changes I had left. But I tried my best to reassure myself. I might get a good tip at work today. Right, some kind man or woman might give me a good enough tip if I tried my best. Even another 5 would be enough. And then, I'll get my payment the day after tomorrow. My job didn't pay much, but it was enough so that we could have daily meals on our table. And it also helped me pay for my school. Julian's kindergarten was a free public school, so that was a big sigh of relief as well. "Here you go." I handed Julian a $5 bill. "Get something nice for lunch, okay? But remember to save up for today and tomorrow." Julian took the money with a smile and went to put his dishes in the sink while I tidied up the table. With that, I headed towards the door with my bag swung over my shoulder. Julian was already out of the door waiting for me to catch up. Sighing, I locked the door and headed to school, pushing my way through another grueling day. Julian's kindergarten and my school were only 5 minutes apart, so it was another advantage. It also meant that I could keep an eye on him if needed. "See you later, sis." "Oh, and I'll be a little late," Miss Lindsay said. "That she'll show us a movie with talking fishes in it," Julian said, with wonder as he described Finding Nemo, and I felt horrible for not being able to show him movies and cartoons that a kid his age should be watching. I could barely manage food and other supplies for our home. With the income I made, so paying for a television was out of the question. Julian might be the only kid in class today who hasn't watched Finding Nemo yet. "All right." I waved him goodbye with a kiss to his forehead and waited to see him enter the school building before I continued on to my school, Belfast Public High. As I neared the gate, I saw people talking and laughing merrily in their own little groups that you can easily find in any high school. I didn't belong to any of these groups, and neither did I have any friends. I was a loner, the person everyone hated and stayed away from. So it's not like I have people lining up to be my friends in the first place. "Move, freak. You're blocking our way." I balled my hands into fists as that annoying voice came from behind me. The voice of the person who has made my high school life a living hell. The school's most beloved bad boy and player, Cameron MacGyver Freya's Poe V. I moved out of the way hastily as the red and black Jeep sped past me through the open gates and headed straight for the parking lot. It was followed by another sleek black car that left a gust of smoke in the air, making me choke on the fumes. Derek Rowland and Alexander Cabot were the first to step out of the Jeep. They were Cameron's best friends and some of the hottest boys in school. Derek with his jet black hair and gray eyes, and Alex with his brunette hair and green eyes that were usually behind gold-rimmed glasses. And the next person to step out was Cameron MacGyver himself. The boy with the sandy blonde hair and electric blue eyes that had the entire school mesmerized. All 3 boys were not only good-looking with the perfect athletic body, but they were also great at studies as well as good athletes. They were the elite students of our tiny school, the boys who made the entire town proud, and then there were the cheerleaders. Cindy Stewart, Laura Windsor, and Tricia Smith, the trio who were always hanging around the two boys. It was difficult to say who was dating who, but the three girls have been involved with both Derek and Alex at different times. But while Derek was a known flirt, Alex was the more reserved type who people didn't want to get near easily because of his stuck-up vibe. In general, Alex hardly spoke and was positioned as the soccer team goalkeeper, while Derek was the quarterback. Cameron, on the other hand, was the captain of the soccer team. And even though the whole school loved to gossip about who he was dating, it wasn't much of a question for speculation, because there was only one girl who was allowed to ride in his car, and that girl was none other than Sarah Parker, the captain of the cheerleading squad, and the most beautiful girl in our school. As I watched the group from afar, much like everyone else in the parking lot, Cameron moved around the car to the passenger side and held the door open for Sarah as she stepped out in a pink cardigan over a white top and light blue jeans. The color of her cardigan matched the pink highlights in her long blonde hair that reached her mid-back. I watched Cameron extend his hand for her, which Sarah took gracefully while stepping out. I don't know why, but the gesture made my chest tighten just a little bit. Especially as Sarah smiled up at Cameron, her face radiant as they gazed at each other. Frowning at the ridiculous tightness inside my chest, I decided to go inside the building first, because the entire school seemed to have stopped what they were doing to watch the popular kids get off of their high horses. Honestly, it was the same scene every morning. Their parents were super rich and their kids were super spoiled. They owned the latest cell phones, the latest cars, and the latest fashion. Everyone here wanted to either be friends with them or date one of them. Or simply just hated their guts because they got their chance but were rejected. Me. I wasn't even on their radar because I was the loner girl who wore clothes from the Goodwill donation center, ate the cheapest breads in the cafeteria, and didn't even own a cell phone. What was the use of a cell phone if I couldn't even afford money to make calls? My first class was English, one of the classes which I wasn't actually terrible at. I shared this class with Alex, who was another topper and sat up front. It was good thing though, because I sat right at the back, away from all the commotion and the fangirling, and concentrated on my own work peacefully, as much as I could. My second class was biology, and that went by smoothly too without any problems. However, lunch came next, and it was the only part about school that I wasn't a fan of. Lunchtime meant that every single student from all classes would be roaming around the hallways, and the cafeteria, and I would get more than a few snide comments or whispers behind my back. I didn't get these people. If they didn't like me, why couldn't they just ignore me? Why did they have to make stupid comments that made me question my very existence every single day? I was sick and tired of them, to the point where I had thought about quitting school several times. But if I had to keep feeding myself and Julian, I needed a job, and a job with a decent salary would require a high school degree at the very least. Heading over to the lunch lady, I looked over at the magnificent spread of food that most students always complained about. If I got to eat something like this every day, I would never even think about complaining. But I didn't have the luxury to enjoy this meal. I was a half-scholarship student, owning to the fact that I hadn't always been a total failure. But in order to eat lunch at school, I needed to provide money. Money that I didn't have. So I had opted out of school lunches. Now, I dug around inside my wallet for the changes that I had seen this morning. With a total of $1, I handed it to the lunch lady, who gave me a disdainful look before counting every last penny, and then she roughly handed me a slice of sweet bread. But just as I was about to leave with the bread, I bumped into someone standing right behind me, and the bread fell to the floor at my feet. Scrambling to the floor, I picked up the bread and dusted off the outside so it was still edible. 5-second rule, right? Watch it. A hiss sounded from above, and I stood up to come face to face with Cindy, one of the cheerleaders in Cameron's group. Silently, I moved out of her way, not wanting to fight with her for no reason, but it seemed like Cindy was dying for a fight. "Hey, stupid bitch!" She yanked me back with a grip on my hoodie. "What's with that attitude, huh? Apologize to me this instant, before I was forced to do something that wasn't my fault." A voice stopped her from behind. "Cindy." Cindy looked over instantly, letting go of me as she followed after Alex, the person who had called out to her. Was it just me, or had it sounded like there was a warning in his voice? However, I didn't dwell on the tiny act of kindness and made a dash for the door, so I could go to the courtyard and have my lunch in peace. It was sunny outside, with not many shady trees in sight, which is why I opted to eat outdoors. Because I would be left alone here, and the reason for me deciding to eat alone was also Cameron McGivern. I would never forget the first day of high school and my first encounter with the boy who I found incredibly attractive. It had been lunch hour, and I had been looking for a seat. But before I could take a seat, someone had tripped me by holding out their leg, making me fall on the ground. That hadn't been the end of it. While getting knocked down, I had tripped into 2 other students, and the entire contents of their lunch had fallen onto my head the next instant, making me a laughingstock for the entire cafeteria. It was then that I had seen Cameron and Derek high-five each other as they had laughed their asses off. Since then, I never eat inside the cafeteria, but that incident had just been the start of my misery. He and his group liked to make fun of those who were weak and defenseless, and then their followers would do the same just to please them. In fact, I think even the team had no idea how devastating one single careless gesture from them could do to ruin someone's life. Cameron didn't even know I existed, but since he insulted me a couple times, in the hallway or in a class that I shared with him, his wannabe buddies kept that taunt alive even months after the incident happened. A single even had started a never-ending chain reaction. Sometimes, I wonder if I was in my right mind. How could I find Cameron attractive after all the humiliation he put me through? I wish I could get the answer one day. Freya's POV. Freya, the math teacher, Mr. Agnes, called out to me in his usual strict voice while handing out our test results from last week. "Come up here." The instant he told me to come up here, I knew that I had failed the test. And even though I could conjure up 1,000 different excuses for my failure, the truth was, I had never been good at math or science. I don't even know why and how I ended up in these classes in the first place. With everything going on in my life, I was pretty sure I was just sleep, walking from one day to the other, just waiting for Julian to grow up, so this could all be over. Pulling my hoodie down lower on my face, I got up from my seat and headed straight for the teacher's desk. He handed me my paper right away, his expression grim. "You'll need to complete another assignment if you wish to pass high school, Freya." Eck. Could have been a minus, right? At least it's a plus. Without saying anything, I nodded my head, letting him know that I understood, since his cheek had started to hurt when I spoke. But it seemed to have enraged him even further. "You ungrateful little brat." He threw the papers on his table at my face, making me flinch back. "I'm trying to help you graduate here, but look at your ridiculous behavior. You don't even know how to be grateful." Immediately, I lowered my head, trying to find my voice as I fumbled with my words. "I'm sorry. Thank you. Enough." He snapped back at me. "Pick up the papers and get back to your seat and stay back after class." "Yes, sir." I lowered myself to the floor, scrambling to pick up the rest of the papers. Once I had all of them neatly lined up, I set aside my own paper and placed the rest on the teacher's desk before turning back towards my seat. But just as I was heading to the back of the class, someone placed their leg out at the last moment and caused me to trip and fall face first on the floor, causing the entire class to erupt into laughter. Pain erupted in my entire body as I tried to pick myself back up. Worst, I think I hurt my knee on something when I fell. The laughter all around me sounded deafening, but it was nothing new. At least I tried to remind myself that as tears welled up in my eyes, both from the pain and the embarrassment. "What's the matter, Fetty, Cameron's best friend?" Derek's voice sounded right then, as if he was rejoicing in my suffering. "Need a hand, or are you gonna start cleaning the floor while you're down?" Oh, how badly I wanted to punch the crap out of him. To permanently wipe that smile that taunted me even in my dreams. To humiliate him the way he does me. But I couldn't. I'll always be a coward, never strong enough to stand up to him or any other bully. I had enough scars for a lifetime. I didn't need any more. So, timidly, I got up from the floor while he and his best friends laughed their asses off, accompanied by their cheerleader groupies. Reaching my seat, I folded the test paper and put it back inside my bag. There was no point in going through my mistakes anyway, since it was a failed test. Silently, I began taking notes as the teacher wrote down equations on the blackboard. The bell rang only 13 minutes later, causing the entire class to sigh in relief. Apparently, a lot of people hated math. But while the others packed up their bags and left, I was stuck in this room for God knows how long, since the teacher had asked me to stay back. Suddenly, just as the class was almost cleared out, I felt someone's eyes on me, their gaze intense enough to raise the tiny hair at my nape. Lifting my head just a little, I peeked from under my lashes to find Cameron's electric blue eyes staring directly at me. I lowered my head instantly. It was the way he stared at me that had a shiver run down my spine. The intensity of it made me feel like he could see right through to my soul. Know all my deepest, darkest secrets. Even though our eyes had met for hardly a fraction of a second, I had felt my heart hammer against my chest, the wretched organ filled with false hope. Once again, I was struck anew with just how gorgeous he was. Sandy blonde hair and blue eyes the same color as that of the ocean surrounding us. With a face sculpted by an expert Greek sculptor, he was the soccer team captain. So it was obvious that he worked out. But I often kept wondering how a 17-year-old could have that kind of a figure when guys twice his age would have to work countless hours at the gym to get half the number of abs he had. And no, I wasn't a stalker who liked to peek in through his bathroom. The entire soccer team liked to do stretches in the field quite often, without their shirts on, and I, along with the rest of the school, happened to have glimpsed them in their shirtless glory. In fact, all of Cameron's friends were the sexy, hunky kind. And the girls who hung out with them were pretty enough to be models. They also happened to live in the same neighborhood. A neighborhood filled with blessed genetics. That's why I could never even dream about standing next to him. I wasn't worthy. "Cameron," Mr. Agnes called out, breaking me out of my thoughts. "Do you have something to say?" "Yes, sir." He spoke in his usual husky rough voice that always made my skin tingle. "I wanted to ask about this question that you marked wrong." "All right. Bring it up here." "Great." The guy was a literal genius. Didn't he just get an A in his test? I was sure he was now going to get an A. I shook my head as Cameron reached the teacher's desk. Why was I even bothered with how much he got on this test? Or what that single second's worth of eye contact even meant? He was on a completely different level than me. There was no reason for me to even imagine a comparison between the two of us. Yes, I may or may not have had a crush on his handsome face, but who doesn't? The entire school had a crush on Cameron McGivern, but that didn't mean I was going to act on that crush and make a fool of myself. Besides, Cameron hated my guts too, just like everyone else in this school. Not that we had many students to begin with. Belfast County was a pretty small area, but that was what made my life even worse. Everybody knew me, the girl without a mother and a gambler dad who was never present. The pitiful loser. As Cameron and Mr. Agnes were engaging in their conversation over the exam papers, I tidied up my table and put my books back inside my bag before heading to the teacher's desk. I stayed behind so as not to interfere with their work. Not long after, Cameron took the papers back with a thank you and went out the door without a backward glance. See, how could it be possible that the clown would stand beside the shining prince? It will never happen. Freya's pay-e. I hadn't expected him to wait for me, or even bother to look back even once. Then why? Why did it feel like a betrayal when he left the room suddenly? Like the mere thought of being around me was like poison to him. Was I overthinking? Did the searing look he gave me a few minutes ago all part of my imagination? What was wrong with me today? Freya. Upon hearing my name, I came forward to greet the teacher. Mr. Agnes brought out a stack of papers and placed them on the desk. Here you go. Complete these papers by the end of this month and I'll consider giving you a better score. Remember, the lesser the mistakes, the higher you score. Yes, Mr. Agnes. I bowed my head out of gratitude, thankful that he was at least trying to help me pass high school. I reached out to take the papers, but before I could remove my hand, Mr. Agnes reached out to place his hands on top of mine. My entire body froze in shock as my eyes widened. What was going on? I looked up into Mr. Agnes's eyes to find a shrewd expression on his face as he looked back at me. I didn't like it. It held a deeper meaning that I didn't even want to comprehend. Remember to be grateful, Freya. Mr. Agnes's voice changed almost completely as he spoke to me now. Remember how hard I'm trying to help you pass. So try harder too, okay? A shiver of horror ran down my spine as he pronounced harder in a not-so-pleasant manner. Why? Yes. I swallowed past the lump forming in my throat, taking a hasty step back so that he was forced to let go of my hand. Heading straight to the locker room, I placed the papers and my bag inside my locker and headed straight to the washroom. Once I'd checked that all the stalls were empty, only then I let myself break down a little. Letting out a shuddering breath, I let the tears fall as my entire body shook vigorously from the shock. I gave myself the permission to whimper as the scene from the classroom played over and over again inside my head. Having my classmates humiliate me was an everyday occurrence for me. But a teacher. This was the first time something like this had happened to me. And it was like my worst nightmare coming true in front of my very eyes. After a few minutes had passed and I had calmed myself down enough to finally be able to function normally again, without shaking like a leaf, I took off my hood to check on the swelling on my cheeks. Thankfully, it was now back to normal, so I wouldn't be frowned upon when I went to serve at the restaurant this afternoon. I splashed some water on my face and hands and wiped them down with some tissues carefully, so as not to agitate the wounded area. Then, I took out my concealer from the pocket of my jeans and reapplied on the dark red bruise that was now turning blue around the edges. Just as I was done applying, I heard the bathroom door open and two of the cheerleaders walk in. Immediately, I put up the hood and stored away the concealer. Yeah, it's weird too, don't you think? Trisha, the girl with brunette hair and wide hazel eyes, was laughing with her friend Cindy. But hasn't Cameron always been like that? Oh, Lord. More fangirling over Cameron. Rolling my eyes, I entered one of the stalls to take care of business. But I still kept an ear out to their conversation. I mean, yeah, but he's almost 18, you know. Cindy replied with a giggle, as if they hadn't even noticed me. So it's only natural that he starts to notice everyone around him. Eep. Trisha made a weird sound, and I could almost imagine her bouncing up and down in excitement. Who do you think it'll be, damn? I want it to be me so badly. But I think it'll be Sarah. Yeah, I think so too. Cindy's voice sounded upset. Almost sad. They just fit each other, right? Sadly, yes. Trish's voice began to fade as they began to walk out of the bathroom. But still, let's not. The door slammed shut, cutting off the rest of their gossip as I flushed the toilet and came out of the stall, trying to figure out exactly what their conversation had meant. Cameron was turning 18 soon. That much was clear, but what did they mean by he was starting to notice everyone around him? And wasn't Sarah, the head cheerleader, already Cameron's rumored girlfriend? I mean, they literally went everywhere together, and they even had the same classes. But the most startling fact among all was, why did I suddenly feel so upset upon hearing the two cheerleaders talk about him and Sarah? Freya's POV. I'm so sorry, Julian. I petted his light brown hair that still had some blonde highlights on it. You'll have to come to the restaurant with me this afternoon. That's all right. Julian gave me a sweet smile. I like the restaurant. Uncle Roger gives me treats sometimes, breathing a sigh of relief. I took my brother's hand and started walking in the direction of the restaurant. I hadn't realized just how long I had stayed in the washroom, just staring at the mirror after listening to the girls. And in doing so, I had been late to grab Julian from the kindergarten. As a result, I was almost late to work, so I didn't have time to send him back home before heading to Roger's diner, the place I work at after school. Since I was a minor and a part-timer, I was only eligible for the minimum wage. But that was fine too. At least it was something. It helped me earn $400 a week, which was enough to buy supplies for the entire week and pay off some of my father's debt that he had taken from our neighbors. Unfortunately, I had only joined work last year, out of fear of Julian starving to death, so I hadn't been able to pay off much. There were still thousands of dollars to pay back and 3 months left till I turned 18 and get a chance at a better wage. Chris, the cleaning guy who was old enough to be my dad, greeted me as I was entering through the back door. There you are, lad. He handed me the huge garbage bags he was carrying, almost making me drop them because of the weight. Throw these for me, will ya, and don't drop them. You drop, you clean. I nodded my head with a forced smile as I told Julian to wait at the door as I threw out the trash. I didn't bother reminding Chris that throwing the trash was a part of his job, not mine. He wasn't exactly the nicest of people, and I couldn't afford to be fired from the job. Taking Julian's hand once I was done, I entered the restaurant through the back door, through the kitchen, and was immediately flooded with all kinds of delicious scents. I felt my stomach rumble as I had only been able to get a sweet bun for lunch at school with the changes that I had in my wallet. But it wasn't time to eat just yet. Roger, I asked the owner as I saw him sitting at the back with a ton of bills and his reading glasses sitting at the very edge of his nose. He was a man in his early 50s with salt and pepper hair that he liked to keep long, along with a big beard. He didn't talk much to his employees and was often strict with management, but he was a pretty decent guy. Can Julian stay here during my shift today? Roger frowned as he looked up from the bills, his eyes holding some amount of anger at my question. But since Julian was with me, he didn't bother scolding me. He can stay today, he said in his gruff voice. Don't make it a habit, kid. I won't, I promise. I told him sincerely because I knew having a 5-year-old in a restaurant full of grown men and women was no fun. They cussed a lot and used certain terminology that wasn't fit for a child, but now everyone would have to watch their words and be tight-lipped around him, especially during peak hour. Seating Julian at the back next to Roger, I took out his books and told him to catch up on homework while I changed into my uniform, a crisp white shirt, blue knee-length skirt, and an apron with the diner's logo on it. I placed my writing pad in my front pocket and combed my hair so it didn't look uneven. It was obvious that the cut wasn't professional, but at least it was short and neat. Freya, customers, one of the older waiters called out as he came inside the kitchen with his hands full of dirty dishes. Got it. I ran outside to the dining area, ready to take orders, but I stopped dead in my tracks as soon as I was a few feet away from the table. My heart literally skipped a beat when I saw who I had to serve this afternoon. Cameron, Derek, Alex, and the cheerleaders. And by cheerleaders, I didn't mean their entire Belfast High cheerleading squad, but the girls who were always seen hanging off of their arms, their rumored girlfriends and their besties. The ones who were always making fun of me. Fuck my life. Swallowing, I put on my fakest smile as I approached their table. Are you ready to order? Cameron was the first person to notice me. And then, one by one, all their attention turned towards me as several eyes widened, and eyebrows were raised in amazement. Goodness, the freak show can actually smile. Derek laughed as he pointed towards me. What do you think, Trisha? I grit my teeth together as Trisha laughed at my face, while placing her hands in front of her face to look like a posh lady. You called her a freak show yourself. How do you think she looks? How come everyone I hated was here at this moment? The only reason I chose to work at this restaurant was because it was far enough from school that not a lot of students frequented this part of town. Then why were they all here, at this cheap restaurant, rather than at a fancy Italian restaurant ordering fancy pasta and shit? All I wanted was just a peaceful ending of the day. Was this too much? Freya's pay v. Since Cameron and his team of bullies were already here, and from the looks of it, the day was only going to progressively keep getting worse. What do you recommend? It was Alexander's voice that cut through their laughing. The brunette boy with glasses and green eyes looked completely uninterested in Derek's mocking as he flipped through the menu card. What's today's special? That would be the quarter-pound cheeseburger, and bacon and cheese fries. I held out the writing pad to take down their orders, gripping my pen tighter so I could get through with this already. Too much cheese. Cindy and Laura spoke at the same time, in their typical cheerleader persona. It wouldn't be the first time I've experienced such a customer, and that was exactly how I planned to treat them, like any other regular customer. No more, no less. Would you like salads instead? I asked them, trying my best not to stutter or sound impolite. We have Caesar, pasta salad with Thousand Island dressing and a fruit salad. 2 pasta, 1 Caesar and 2 fruit salads, please, dressings on the side. I looked up from my notepad to find that the softer, kinder tone of voice actually belonged to Sarah, the head cheerleader. And the boys will be 2 cheeseburgers and 2 fries. But then she turned to place a hand on Cameron's arm, who was sitting right next to her. You said you were craving the steak. Should we order that? I found myself gritting my teeth unintentionally as I watched the two of them interact with each other. Fuck. Trisha and Cindy had been right. They looked perfect together. The golden couple Cameron, with his sandy blonde hair and blue eyes, and Sarah with light blonde hair and pink highlights, with sea green eyes. They just fit next to each other perfectly. Sure. Whatever you say. Cameron gave her a warm smile that I had never seen him give anyone else, and it made my chest feel tight in a weird way. What was wrong with me? Was I actually jealous of Sarah Parker? Out of all the cheerleaders, she was the kindest to everyone in school. That was one of the reasons why she was so popular, and it wasn't like I was vying for Cameron's affection in the first place. What on earth was I even jealous about? It felt as ridiculous as a moth being jealous of the sun. Then please add one of your finest pieces of steak, medium rare. Sarah smiled up at me, surprising me with her knowledge of just how well she knew Cameron. That would be all. Any drinks? I noted down their orders and headed back to the kitchen immediately to hand them over to the chefs. There weren't any new customers and 2 other waiters were already serving the current tables that were occupied, so I held back to help Julian with his homework while I waited for the food to be prepared. In all honesty, I wanted to hand over my duty to another one of my colleagues, but I knew they wouldn't take it, especially since this wasn't a matter of urgency. But for personal reasons alone, the burgers were the first to get done. So I took those out for Alex and Derek. The latter kept on giving me funny looks and whispering to Trisha, who kept on laughing with her mouth covered. I sneaked a peek at Sarah and Cameron to find them deep in conversation. And from the looks of it, it was about something serious. Averting my eyes as soon as Cameron looked up at me, as if sensing my eyes on him, I walked back to the kitchen briskly to get the rest of the orders. I thought they would been done soon, but the group held back, taking their sweet time eating and drinking. To top it off, they ordered even more food, and their conversation became hushed and secretive as time went by. I went on to serve nearby tables as time went by and the usual evening crowd started coming in. So far, I had made only $10 in tips as I waited 3 more tables. God, I felt completely exhausted and so hungry that I just wanted to go home and pass out. But it didn't seem like I would be getting any breaks until the end of my shift. I felt perspiration drip down my spine and felt my arms ache from carrying the heavy trays. But it was a full house, so I pushed through despite the difficulties. Finally, about 2 hours later, Cameron's group was finally done. I went and cleaned out their table and handed them their bill, keeping my head down as I averted their eyes. Not so surprisingly, it was over $100 and none of them said anything about splitting the bill as Cameron paid the full in cash. And since you've been so generous, Derek smirked, holding out a $20 bill. Here you go. Hope loomed in my chest. $20 was enough to last me 2 whole days. I could get apple juice for Julian as well. He had been craving some for days, but I didn't have enough money to get him some. But just as I reached out to get the 20, Derek let go of the money, and it floated to the floor at his feet. Thinking it was a slip, I bent down to retrieve it, but as soon as I touched the money, a booted foot landed on my hand, making me gasp in pain. Come on. What's the hurry? Don't be such a desperate hoe. Derek's maniacal laughter made me feel like the entire restaurant's attention was now on us, specifically me. Derek. Cameron's voice sounded then, harsh and rough, and that single word had Derek removing his foot from my hand immediately. I stayed down, swallowing whatever was left of my pride and begging to whoever was listening to give me strength. Please. I begged over and over again. Please don't make me cry. Please, it's almost over. I bit down on my trembling lip, reminding myself over and over that it wasn't the time to cry or show weakness. It'll be over soon. Clutching the bill tightly in my hand, I rose from the floor. My eyes lowered so that I didn't have to face their satisfactory grins. But before I could leave, Cameron's voice stopped me once again. How could you pick that up? After what just happened? His voice was harsh, so I kept my eyes lowered, not wanting to face his anger. Don't you have any self-respect? I could feel the anger growing in his words, but I just sneered. Self-respect? Was he kidding me? I looked down at the $20 bill in my hands, unclenching my fingers slowly so as not to damage the money. The devil must have been sitting on my shoulders because, for the first time in my life, I decided to speak up. Shouldn't you be asking that to your friend instead? I spoke softly, satisfied with the fact that I didn't stutter. Shouldn't you be asking your friend how it felt to crush his parents' hard work? Their blood, sweat, and tears? Under his boots? With that, I left the dining area quietly, and as quickly as possible as an eerie silence descended upon their table. And I had this vague idea that a pair of eyes were following my every move. Freya's. Po-e. Another hour went by after Cameron's group left the restaurant. Everything was going smoothly, and I breathed a sigh of relief on making it to the end of my shift without causing any major trouble. The day was almost at its end, and I was finally going to go home and rest. At this point, I wasn't even hungry anymore. I just wanted to sleep. I changed out of my work clothes and folded them neatly inside my locker. They should be good for another day, and I'll be able to get them cleaned tomorrow so I can keep wearing them next week as well. But just as I exited the changing room, Roger was there to greet me and he didn't look happy at all. What? What is it? I asked him, looking up at his grim face. One of our customers complained about your rude behavior today. He got straight to the point, and even though I know they are from the same school as you, I'll have to take disciplinary actions. My heart sank to the pit of my stomach. I wasn't scared because of the complaint, because I knew Cameron's team wouldn't go down quietly after what I told them this evening. What I was scared about was the later disciplinary action. Was Roger going to cut my pay? What would I do if he did? I had to pay $300 worth of debt money. Where was I going to get that? Roger sighed audibly, startling me into looking back up at his face. Don't give me that look. I didn't just kill your pet hamster, he frowned. But you won't be getting any leftovers for dinner today. Got it, I nodded quickly, relieved that it wasn't a pay cut. Thank you, sorry. I'll keep this in mind. Roger didn't say anything as he went back to his table to work. Julian had already packed up his bag and was ready to go. But what I was surprised at, though, was the fact that he had a huge grin on his face when I told him it was time to leave. What's up, kiddo? I waited till we were outside the restaurant to ask him, wondering what could have made him so happy. You look really happy. I am. Julian giggled, bouncing up and down on his feet. Roger gave me noodles today. A lot of it. He said that someone canceled an order so I could have it instead. I stopped walking. There had been no canceled orders today. That much I was sure about, because canceled orders were usually handled by Roger himself, and he would come out personally to investigate why a person canceled. That means that Roger hadn't been as heartless as he made me believe. He had fed Julian while I had been busy working. He had taken care of my baby brother while I hadn't been looking. I blinked back tears as I used the sleeves of my hoodie to wipe at my eyes. Was it good? I asked Julian, my voice thick with emotions as I began walking again. Did you eat well? Yes. Julian laughed. I ate all of it. It was so good, Uncle Roger told me. He'll give you some too. Did you eat all? Yes. I lied to him. Of course I did, although the day was full of ups and downs. It finally passed by with a not-so-bad ending. I kept on walking, unknowing to the fact that I wasn't alone. Tanti. How don't. Cameron's. POV. Derek, you crossed a line today. Sarah spoke from next to me, her voice soft yet stern. I hope you won't be repeating this mistake again. Sorry. He lowered his head, his black hair falling forward so that his eyes weren't visible, but I knew he wasn't sorry. He was just acting like he was so we didn't complain to the alpha. Let's leave, I ordered, getting up from my seat and coming out of the restaurant. Almost everyone followed me out at once except for Derek, who took his sweet time talking to another waiter. There he goes again. Alex shook his head in exasperation. We really need to report him. What's the point? Trisha frowned up at us. He was just having fun with a human. It's not like he broke any pack rules. Besides, Cindy pointed out to the back alley, I saw her walking in with a kid before entering the restaurant. Miss Righteous isn't that righteous at all. Girls, is that how we speak about people nowadays? Sarah's voice was sharp for the first time. Being human doesn't make anyone's struggles inferior, but shh, Alex. I called out to my friend in the future beta, cutting off Cindy's complaints. Please send everyone back to the pack house. I'll stay behind with Sarah. Sure. Alex took out his car keys and took everyone to the parking as Sarah and I stayed behind. Are you sure it's her? Sarah asked, once the rest of our packmates were out of earshot. Were you able to get a better handle on the situation today? Sighing. I pinched the bridge of my nose as frustration set in. I have no idea. Her scent tells me that she could be my mate, but you don't want it to be her? Sarah asked before nodding. I get that. She's human. She has no idea about what we are. Do you really think that's the only reason? I snapped at her. Did you even look at the girl? She looks like a living ghost. Damn it. Why couldn't it have been you? Me? Sarah's laughter was like the tinkling of bells, and it drew a few eyes in our direction. That would be taking the easy way out. We have known each other our whole life, Cam. We're more like family than lovers. But we could have been. I told her, hope still adjacent in my heart. We can still be mates, Sarah. What if my stupid instincts are wrong? What if they're just malfunctioning before my 18th birthday? Cameron's. Pooh Ev-E. This time, Sarah's laughter was mocking. Seriously, Cam, stop making excuses. We're wolves, not robots. We don't malfunction. Besides, Freya looks like a nice girl, but I shook my head once again. I didn't want it to be true, damn it. I didn't want Freya to turn out to be my mate. We were polar opposites, and to top it all off, she was human. What was the point of me having a human mate when I was the future alpha? Give it time, Cam. Sarah patted my shoulder as she stepped away, in preparation to leave. Once you imprint on her, you'll forget everything else. Have patience and trust in the will of the moon goddess. With that, she left me standing outside the restaurant as she walked back towards the direction of the parking. Probably hoping to catch the rest of the group before they left. I debated on following after her, but decided against it. I waited for Freya instead. Take Sarah with you guys. I told Alex via our mental link. She's heading your way. Spotted her, already, sighing. I looked up at the starry sky. 1,000 emotions crossing my mind at the same time. My life had been going just fine this entire time. I was the future alpha, the captain of the soccer team, and I was going to turn 18 very soon and find the person that I was going to be spending the rest of my life with. But since yesterday, as soon as I had entered school, I started to get this alluring scent all over. The scent wasn't strong, but it was there. And unfortunately, it seemed like it was coming from all over the school campus. At first, I had tried to ignore it, stopping myself multiple times from following the scent. But it almost felt like the scent was calling to me. It had been driving me crazy since yesterday, but I was holding back with teeth-gritting control, because one thing I had been sure of was that the scent hadn't belonged to Sarah, the girl I had a crush on since middle school. Sarah and I had grown up together, gone through all our troubles together. She knew me like no one else, and I had always thought that we were destined to be mates. In fact, it wasn't just me. Pretty much the entire pack had thought that I was going to end up with Sarah. But now that I knew the scent wasn't from her, it was driving me crazy. My wolf, on the other hand, was dead calm. Because it liked the new scent. And surprisingly, Sarah had seemed relieved that I wasn't her mate, and had even encouraged me to seek her out to follow the scent. It hadn't been until this morning, when I had watched Freya being tripped and fall in math class, that I had found the source of the scent. It was then that my wolf had reacted violently inside my head, filled with protective instincts for a girl I didn't even know, and I just knew that she was my mate. The one girl I was going to be imprinting on as soon as I turned 18. It was a gut feeling that I couldn't shake off. Imprints were a bitch. We werewolves had no choice when it came to choosing our mates. They were always chosen by the moon goddess, and once imprinted, we could no longer be with any other women. We lost interest in everyone almost immediately. No, it didn't mean I was going to fall head over heels in love with her as soon as I saw her. But it meant I couldn't love anyone else but her after the imprint. Sighing, I got up from the wooden bench next to the park that overlooked the restaurant and saw Freya exiting through the back door with a kid in tow. I saw her walking in with a kid before entering the restaurant. Miss Righteous isn't that righteous at all. Cindy's voice rang in my ears as I narrowed my eyes at her. Was it really her child? He looked to be around 5 or 6 years old. Wouldn't that mean Freya had to be 11 or 12 when she gave birth? That thought was so ridiculous that I wanted to slap myself. There was no way that child was Freya's. It must be a cousin, or perhaps her little brother. It was the only rational explanation I could think of. Suddenly, I found that I had started to follow behind them almost involuntarily. I wanted to curse myself for acting like a stalker, but I also couldn't stop following her. So I kept to the shadows and walked behind the two of them for about 20 minutes as they reached a shady area in Belfast Fourside. The seashore was only a minute's walk from here on, and this area was surrounded by rundown houses that looked centuries old and ready to collapse. Was this really where they lived? Soon enough, we reached the end of the road, and Freya entered the house at the end of the street. It was a tiny house with an attic and broken fencing. The paint was chipped and discolored, and the entire place reeked of despair. Just being this close made me feel uncomfortable. How could the two of them live here? Where were her parents? What did they do? So many questions flooded my mind, but I didn't have a single answer. The only thing I had, though, was this feeling of guilt that overwhelmed every other sense. As I stared at the house, for the first time in my life, I thought I should get to know the girl who I had never truly known. And the girl was going to be my mate. Freya's, Pav, rummaging through the bottom bathroom cabinet in my room. I finally breathed a sigh of relief when I found the packet of cup noodles at the very back of the storage unit, right behind the sanitary napkins that I stored away. I wasn't just starving at this point, but my entire body was trembling in exhaustion and low blood sugar levels. I was shaking like a leaf as I searched the entire house for food that I had hidden in safe places, so that when my dad left after finishing up all of our resources, me and Julian would still have food to eat. Taking the carton out of the cabinet, I found that there were an entire pack of the noodles left. I think I had bought it from a sale last year, when the offer had been 5 noodles for $3. And I had taken it without questions. Now I found the noodles still intact, and much to my surprise, only a month shy of their expiry date. Thank you, God, for little mercies. I closed my eyes in a silent prayer before I got off the floor and came out of my room, so I could cook a packet or two for dinner. Julian had gone to bed as soon as we had returned. He had an early day tomorrow, and I had to get to school on time as well, so I could start working on some of the math problems that Mr. Agnes handed me today. Just thinking about our little mistake encounter after class made a shiver run down my spine. Was I reading the situation wrong? Did Mr. Agnes really say something vile and degrading to me today while handing over the papers? Or was I being paranoid and overreacting? Once I was halfway down the stairs, I scanned the entire house properly with my eyes. Nothing looked out of place since I arrived with Julian, and no sudden movements in the shadows told me that my father hadn't decided to show up today. I went to check the lock on the front door once again, only to find it secure enough and bolted correctly. My paranoia wasn't for nothing. I thought to myself as I took out an ice pack from the fridge and began to apply it to my cheek. Whenever my father decided to come home, I was the one who suffered. Blow after blow after blow, until he was tired of hitting me, or until I was bleeding and near unconscious. It didn't matter to him that I was his own blood, the daughter who was once the apple of his eyes. Now, he couldn't stand me at all. Julian knew that he wasn't to come out of his room if he heard noises in the living room. No matter who those noises came from, when he was younger, he would start wailing and banging on the door, trying to get out so he could come to me. He had successfully even managed to open the door once and reach the living area, only to be slapped so hard that he had had a bruise for 2 weeks. So after that day, I usually kept his door locked. I could handle anything that came my way, but to see Julian hurt was a wound too deep on my heart. He was the reason I was alive. He was the reason I was going to have to survive. After I boiled some water and hydrated my noodles with it, I kept 2 packets inside the cabinet, so Julian and I could have them for breakfast tomorrow. I also needed to go to the grocery store to check if I could still get some stuff on a discount. Finishing up my noodles, I had just about done with the dishes when I heard a knock from Julian's door. Frowning, I went to open it, only to find him wide awake and staring up at me through big blue eyes full of guilt. Julian? I crouched down to his level. What's wrong, baby? Did you wet the bed again? But Julian shook his head instantly, his eyes brimming with tears. It broke my heart to see him like this. Cupping his cheek, I looked him in the eyes, making sure he understood what I said. You can tell me anything, okay? No matter what it is, I'll listen. I told him calmly. So tell me what's bothering you, Munchkin. Tell me so I can fix it. Julian's eyes momentarily went sideways, and I saw the blue orbs widen with horror. It was already too late when I remembered that I was no longer wearing my makeup, and the bruise from yesterday was now a dark blue-black in color. I hadn't wanted to scare him with it, but I also couldn't keep wearing makeup all the time. But upon seeing the bruise, Julian's sniffles turned into wails as fat drops of tears rolled down his cheeks, and he began to wipe at his eyes while his other hand pointed to the bruise. I had never felt as helpless in my life as I watched him cry like he had never done before. It's okay, Julian. I'll be fine. It's just a little black. That's all. I'm going to be okay in a few days. I'm sorry, Julian wailed, managing to mutter out the words in between his sobs. I'm sorry. Why? You don't have to be sorry for anything, I told him, wiping away the tears. Are you hungry? Was the dinner not filling? No. His sobs quietened a little bit, so I could hear him more clearly. I'm sorry. What happened, Julian? Suddenly, I got this feeling that he might have done something that he was hesitating to tell me about. Did something happen at school? Why, yes, he stuttered out, still wiping at his eyes. I used it all. Used it. What did you? At first I was confused as to what he might be saying, but then his words start to register and dread settled in my stomach. You used all the money I gave you. Unable to talk, Julian just nodded his head. And my legs slipped from under me, causing me to fall on the floor. I don't know what to feel as I just sat there, staring at the wall as Julian's sniffles grew louder. He spent it all. The whole of the $5 that I gave him. He used the entire money. I'm sorry. Go back to your room, I told him, my voice barely above a whisper. Big S.I. Back to your room. This time, my temper got the best of me as I snapped at Julian, startled. He looked at me with wide eyes, but didn't say a word as he followed my orders and went back inside the room. Getting up from the floor, I shut his door, but didn't lock it. It was already late at night, and I highly doubted our father would be returning. He should be safe, shutting out all the lights except the little lamp in the hallway, so Julian didn't get scared if he wanted to go to the bathroom. I ran up the stairs and into my room before collapsing on the bed. Holding the pillow over my face, I screamed my frustration into it as loud as I could. The sound was muffled by the pillow, and for the 1,000th time I worried that Julian would have heard me. But even then, I couldn't stop the broken sobs that escaped my lips, the tears that fell from my eyes. I couldn't do this. I couldn't fucking do this anymore, balling my hands into fists. I hit the pillow with as much force could repeatedly, as my sobs grew louder and my tears came faster. Why? Why was I stuck doing this all alone? Why couldn't I have had a father that was present, Why did I have to be responsible for a 5-year-old child? I was 17 for fuck's sake. I couldn't do this anymore. I was tired, exhausted. Why doesn't my fucker of a father just kill me? Let him just end me if he can't stand to look at me anymore. I want it all to end. I just wanted it all to bloody end. My heart broke again as my rational side took over. If I died, what would happen to Julian? If he gets sent to foster care, will he get a good family? I could still do it, report to the authorities that my father had abandoned us and that I needed help. Then Julian could get adopted and have a nice home and I could go on with my life. Or just end it all. But even as that thought crossed my mind, I couldn't bring myself to do it. I couldn't call authorities because I couldn't lose Julian. Yes, I was the most selfish person in the world, as I didn't want to let go of Julian. But it was all because I had raised him since the day my mother died, not as a big sister but as my mother would have. I had made sure to buy him toys, give him treats. Even if it meant that I would have to starve for a day. Most of all, I had promised my mother that no matter what happens, I would take care of Julian and never let him miss his mother for even a day. I can do this. I spoke through my quietened sobs. I can do this, wiping my eyes with whatever strength I had left. I turned so I was lying on the bed and faced the ceiling. Taking deep breaths, I calmed myself down so I could let my mind drift away to sleep. I had upset Julian too. I knew that, but I didn't have any strength left to go and comfort him right now. Tomorrow, I promised. I'd fix it all tomorrow. Cameron's POV. A knock on my door startled me into looking up from my phone, and at my mother, who had just poked her head in through my door and was now giving me a sheepish smile. I frowned. What is it? The only time she smiled like that was when she wanted some kind of technological favor, with either her smartphone or any other electrical appliances around the house, especially when my dad wasn't around, or when I got in trouble with my dad. That thought itself had my frown deepening, because I hadn't done anything to get into trouble for. I had been getting good grades at school, been doing my regular training on time, and I had aced the monthly soldier training test for the wolves that our pack held for teens. Mom? I asked when she remained silent. Am I in trouble? Not really. She hesitated as she entered my room. Her blonde hair tied up into a tight bun, and her fancy teal-colored dress told me that she had been out and about this evening, possibly taking care of the pack as the current Luna. Would you mind joining us in your father's office? We have something to discuss with you. Of course. Putting down my phone, but not before telling my friends in the group chat that my dad had summoned me. I followed my mother out into the hallway as she led me to Dad's study office. It was where my father took care of all his alpha business as well as his vast shipping business. Our family owned 2 cargo ships and 1 passenger ship, and that was one of the biggest sources of income for our entire pack. However, in a pack structure, each member over the age of 25 had to contribute a certain amount of money to the pack funds for the smooth running of the pack. And the reason why the age limit was 25 and not 18 was because my dad wanted every wolf to go to college. We might be feral animals, predators of the jungle, but the world was no longer a forest. Humans had advanced in science and technology, and life, for the supernatural beings, was no longer the same as it used to be. We needed to conceal our identity now. Blend in to keep our secrets. Mom knocked twice on the hardwood door with her knuckles, and only entered when we got a positive affirmation from my dad. I thought he might have been busy with his work, but there was actually a spread of food on the little sitting area off to the side, where pack members were usually seated while visiting. Cameron. My father smiled as soon as he saw us. Come have a seat, we have much to discuss. Sure. We sat down on the couches. my parents taking the couch opposite to me as my mom began pouring us all some coffee. At first, there was an awkward silence as I took slow sips of my coffee, while my mom and dad acted like nothing was wrong. But in reality, I knew they were having some kind of a mental conversation. All right. I placed my cup back on the table. What's this about? My dad sighed. Son, is Sarah your mate? What? The question kinda threw me off guard, but it shouldn't have really. Sarah's and my parents were not only best of friends, but business partners as well. Her father was also my dad's beta. This was why she and I had been friends since we were newborns, which was also why both of our families were expecting us to be mates. But how could I answer that question when I wasn't even sure of the facts myself? You know. Came the voice of my inner self, an instinct that belonged to the wolf, the feral being that lived inside of me. And it wasn't wrong. I had a hunch, and I wanted it to remain just that, a stupid hunch and not a reality. I don't know. I told my parents now, feeling like I couldn't disclose my inner turmoils just yet. Especially since I wasn't yet 18. I can't really tell if she is my mate or not. That's understandable. Mom pursed her lips as if thinking about it. To be honest, it was Sarah's parents who wanted to know about the mating bond, seeing that the two of you already share such a close relationship. Malaya, that's not how the mating bond asks. My dad reminded her before turning to face me. Look, it's fine if she isn't your mate. I just hope there wouldn't be any hard feeling between the two of you after you do find your true mate. At that moment, I understood what this sudden meeting was about. After all, my dad was a busy man. He didn't have time to suddenly call us for a random family snack time without having some kind of business mixed into the deal. Dad, you don't have T0 worry. I reassured them both. Sarah and I are just best friends. There never has been any relationship between the two of us, and unless we turn out to be mates, there won't be any such relationship either. Sarah was my best friend, and I respected her too much to hurt her in any way. Which is why, while everyone kept speculating about our relationship status, we had simply kept our heads down and remained silent. There was no use adding fuel to the fire by giving the onlookers any kind of attention. The only people who knew the truth were my inner circle members, my best friends. That's good to know. My father finally sighed in relief. I'm glad that the two of you didn't cross any lines that you could never return from. No matter who your mate is, at least it wouldn't hurt Sarah or her family. Charles? My mother's eyes narrowed at him. Would you please keep your business mentality out of family discussions? It's not just about my busyness mentality, Malaya. Dad frowned. Cameron and Sarah will be inheriting our empire, and it would only help them in the future if they do not have any bad blood between them. As my parents went back to discussing their business and profits between my family and the Parkers, I picked up my cup and took a sip of my coffee. Watching the two of them interact in an entirely different light, my mom and dad were equals. They were like two halves of a whole that just fit. Not only were they on the same level intellectually, but also in pack hierarchy. But how can I even think about Freya in the same light? The more I saw my parents, the ideal alpha pair, interact in front of my own eyes, the surer I was that the moon goddess had made a terrible mistake. And soon, the entire pack will know of it. Freya's Poo EV. I watched the waves crashing onto the shore. The stormy winds sweep my hair back from my face violently. It was 5:30 in the morning, and the sun had yet to rise, but there was still light in the horizon, and it was enough to help me see my way around the broken pieces of wood and other debris lying on the sand. This area of the seashore, at the back of my house, wasn't a beach. I don't think it could ever be considered one, with the amount of rubbish lying around. There were far too many rocks on the shore to make swimming almost impossible. But still, whenever I was feeling down, I would come here often, just so I could watch the sun bring new light into the world. But there was another thing that often drew me to this beach. Paw prints. They were all over the sand. At first glance, they would look like regular paws, puppy paws. Unless you take into account the fact that we were in a rundown neighborhood that didn't even have dogs to begin with. But I knew what these were very well. Wolf paws. It was no secret that wolves lived in the woods next to our house and in the other forest areas of Maine. But whenever I came to this beach, I would find larger ones among the smaller paws prints. Mothers with their children. The few neighbors we still had left in this area were all afraid of the wolves, so much so that no one ventured out after 10 o'clock. But the wolves never scared me after all. What was the most they could do? Kill me. Wouldn't that be sweet, sweet relief? But most of all, I liked to follow those footsteps, those paw prints. They stayed for a day at most, until the winds and the tides erased them from existence, but the next morning, I would find them once more. Sometimes, the bigger paws would be missing, and it gave me this vague idea that the pups had come out on their own to cause mischief. While their parents rested at home, I envied those pups. I envied those wolves. They were free and wild. Something I could never be. The first rays of the sun hit my face then, making me look up and wonder as the circle of life appeared in the horizon, slowly becoming full. I took a deep breath, taking in the cool morning air. It gave me strength to continue on for another day. I got up from the remains of a boat that had half rotten away and that I now used as my sitting area. It was time to head back home once more, to prepare Julian for school and to get on with my day while pretending that my life wasn't falling apart. 10:20. Julian was sulking. That much I was sure of. From the puffy cheeks to the red-rimmed eyes and the distinct pout, I knew he was upset with me, and rightfully so. But even if he was only 5 and I loved him to bits, I still had to discipline him when he did something wrong. Turning off the flames to the kettle, I brought out the 2 packs of instant noodles that I had found yesterday and began pouring in the water to the fill line inside the cups before placing the seal back on, so that the noodles could become chewy and bouncy. There had been 1 single egg lying inside the fridge this morning, and usually I would have given him the whole egg, but I decided against it. Wasn't that what my mother would have done? Given him the whole egg, or would she have done what I was doing now, cutting the parboiled egg into half so we could both share? I didn't know how my mother would have reacted, but all I knew was that I was the mother figure that Julian had. And it was times like this that I had to be strict and teach him right from wrong. However, the irony of me giving my brother life lessons when I had no will to keep on living wasn't lost on me. I waited for about 5 minutes for the noodles to bloom before removing the lids and bringing them to the table. But as soon as I placed the cup in front of Julian, his entire face changed from sulky to wonder. "We have noodles?" He looked up at me through big blue eyes filled with hope, and I almost felt sorry for him. "Yes." I kept my voice soft but strict. "Eat up." Julian immediately picked up his fork and dug in, blowing on the noodles to cool them down before stuffing his mouth. I noticed the red rim around his eyes once again. He had probably cried himself to sleep last night, and no matter how much I wanted to keep up the strict act, I caved in. "Did you sleep well?" I asked, looking down at my noodles instead of his adorable face. "Number," came the almost sniffled out reply, surprised. I looked back at him to find his eyes had watered once again. "What's wrong?" I wiped away a fat drop of tear rolling down his cheek. "Did you eat it while it's hot?" He shook his head, making his long hair fall onto his forehead. Number, another sniffle as he looked up at me through long lashes. "I'm sorry," I sighed and placed my hand on his shoulders. "I'm sorry too, Jules. I shouldn't have yelled at you. But there are things that you should know. God knows you're not old enough for this. But you need to understand, honey. We don't have that kind of money." I wish there was a better way to explain this situation to him. But what was I supposed to do? I had to be blunt in order for him to understand, even if he was only 5. However, I didn't want to be rude or scare him at the same time. I tried to find the perfect word to use as an alternate for poor, but my mind kept coming up blank. We're poor. Julian finished that sentence for me, looking into my eyes with his big blue ones. I know. But Molly, I shouldn't have given her the ice cream. I raised my eyebrows as more sniffles followed. Molly, yeah, he hesitated before answering. She sits next to me in class. She gives me her candy too, startled by his confession. I realized that Julian had found himself his first crush, this so-called girl named Molly, who shares her treats with him. It would have been an adorable situation if our condition hadn't been so dire in the first place. You wanted to give her something nice? I asked, most of my anger just dissipating away. I hadn't been mad to begin with, just disappointed. But then again, even that disappointment had been misplaced. Julian was only 5, and it was something I had to keep reminding myself often. Yes, came the tiny voiced answer. Okay. I sighed and placed a kiss to his forehead. Just this once and make sure this never happens again. All right. He nodded, and we both turned back to our food before it became cold. I got half an egg. Julian's next words were another sniffle, and I turned back to find him peeking into my cup to see if I had the other half or not. Do you want it? I asked, picking it up with my spoon so I could show it to him. Yeah. He trailed off, but when I went to give it to him, he shook his head vigorously. I want you to have it more. I fought a smile as my heart warmed at his words. That's all right. I'll get groceries tonight. Then, we can both have whole eggs tomorrow. Julian replied triumphantly, gleefully digging back into his cup. It made me relieved to see him happy once again. Maybe, for one day, I could bring something tasty from the grocery store. Beef would be too costly, but chicken. Maybe even pork. If it was a smaller portion, I think I could afford it, and then I could cook him a meal with the same recipe that our mom used to make on special occasions. I think I still had Mom's old recipe book somewhere in the storage, digging back into my own food. I felt happy for the first time in a long while, having something special to look forward to during the weekend that both Julian and I would enjoy. Cameron's P.O.B. So Cam. Derek smirked at me from across the room, excited for the big 18th. I raised my eyebrows at him in suspicion. What was he trying to pull, and why did he look so smug about it? It was only yesterday when I had reported Derek's behavior to my dad, and he had been summoned to the Alpha's office, and now had to serve 20 hours in a month in the nursery, taking care of the newborns and the toddlers while their parents went out of the pack to work. It was the kind of job every teen detested, and Derek should be sulking about the fact that he got selected for the duty. Not smiling about it. It's the day you find your mate. Derek's smile only got bigger. But we already know who it is, right? You guys probably already feel the mating bond. Sarah shifted in her seat uncomfortable. Her brows furrowed as she turned to look at me. Her eyes held the same question that was already on my mind. What was Derek up to now? You seem overly excited about it, Alex commented from beside me, putting down his game console as he looked up at Derek through his glasses. Considering it isn't even your birthday, Cam's going to be our future alpha. Derek shrugged, turning back to the game he had paused earlier. Why wouldn't I be excited? Alex sighed and took off his glasses, which were more of a style statement than a necessity. He's waiting for the party to hook up with new girls. Sarah groaned from my right, handing over her console to me as she stood up from her seat. I'm done playing. She stretched her arms above her head, making her sweater rise up on her waist. You guys keep going. I'll head back home. Good night. I called out to her as she grabbed her coat and left the game room. For us, it had been like a typical Sunday evening. The four of us hanging out together and then having dinner before finishing up with some fun and games. Usually Trisha and Cindy joined us too, but they left early today since their parents were out of town, and they were in charge of looking after their baby brother and sister respectively. We were a pretty tight-knit community, and we always hung out together. But recently, Derek's behavior had become more and more erratic. I turned to face Alex after the door shut, after Sarah, speaking to him through our mental link rather than using our voice. I didn't want Derek to know what we were talking about, especially since we were talking about him. Is it just me, or do you think something's fishy about his behavior as well? I asked Alex, pretending to be busy on my phone while Alex whooped Derek's ass in the new edition of the Zombie Slayer game that they were playing on my PS5. Every teen hates to work at the nursery, Alex echoed my sentiment. For him to not be pissed about it means he's probably planning something. Yeah. And I have a hunch it's gonna be on my birthday. I sighed, rubbing at the bridge of my nose as I spoke out loud to the both of them. Geez, let's call it a day. I want to hit the bed early today. Sure. Both boys said at once, as they began saving their game and got ready to leave. Derek was the first one to get his stuff together. See you tomorrow, he said before slanting out the door. See you. Both Alex and I echoed, but as soon as the doors were shut and we heard the sound of his footsteps fade down the hallway, we breathed a sigh of relief. You think he could sense that we didn't want him here? I asked Alex, still keeping my supernatural hearing functioning in case Derek decided to return. Probably, Alex shrugged. Or maybe it was the comment he made about you and Sarah. He's probing and I'm guessing someone put him up to the task. Scott? I narrowed my eyes because it was the only person that I could think of who would be interested to know if Sarah was my mate or not. Scott Parker, Sarah's overprotective older brother, who was a senior soldier in our pack hierarchy, and was currently studying in the University of New Hampshire as a senior. Not so surprisingly, Derek's cousin was also in the same college and packmates tend to stick together. No matter where they went, you should make an announcement. Alex sighed. Then people would stop probing both you and Sarah about it. I don't know if you noticed or not, but she feel uncomfortable whenever the question comes up. I know, I get it. I groaned. But that doesn't mean I have to go around making a formal announcement that Sarah isn't my mate, and why is it that you suddenly think she isn't? I haven't turned 18 yet. That's because I know you've found the girl who's supposed to be your mate, Cam. Alex's straightforwardness had my head snapping in his direction as my eyes went wide in surprise. How? I managed to speak out past the lump in my throat. I didn't think you taking us across town to eat at a cheap restaurant was a coincidence. Alex smirked, his green eyes almost sparkling with glee. But you, my dear friend, are still in denial, and because of that, Sarah has to suffer unnecessarily. That had me frowning once again, as I shifted in my seat towards Alex, so I could read his expression clearly. Why? She isn't involved with me in any way. Unfortunately, it all comes from the age-old misconception that a girl and a boy can never only be friends. Alex shrugged as he got up from his couch and stretched. You guys have been best friends since birth and people are used to seeing you together. I guess people were fine with it when you both were kids. But now that you are almost at the age of finding your mate, everyone is wondering exactly how deep your relationship with Sarah is. It's not in a harmful manner though. They just want to look out for both you and her. He didn't have to tell me twice to make it understandable. After my parents called me to their office, I knew what everyone in my pack had in mind, but my concerns remained the same as always. So I decided to voice them to Alex, because out of all my friends he was the wisest and the most sensible person in the group. That was probably because he had already turned 18 2 months ago and still hadn't found his mate. I keep thinking that the moon goddess had made a mistake. I told him now, wanting to know his honest opinion. How could a human girl be chosen as my mate? Mates are supposed to be our equals. Yes. Mates are our equals, Alex said finally, after staying quiet for a few seconds. But equality comes in several forms. You don't even know her. Then how can you just write her off as someone who isn't your equal? Alex's words stayed with me. Long after he had left, he was right. I had been judging Freya only based on her humanity. But from the way that I'd seen her live, there was no doubt that she had her fair share of troubles. Shouldn't you be asking your friend how it felt to crush his parents' hard work? Their blood, sweat and tears? Under his boots? Her words came to mind, of when she had spoken out after Derek had trampled on her hand. The memory of it still made my wolf howl in madness inside my head, and I had to restrain myself several times from harming Derek for good. But her words were also a confirmation that beneath that fragile exterior was a spine of steel and a heart of a beast. If she was able to stand up to a wolf of alpha power, then indeed she was no ordinary girl. But even if she wasn't ordinary, she was still human. And a mate was an alpha's ultimate weakness. At present, two questions stood out the most, as I started to acknowledge, not accept, the fact that Freya could be my mate. 1. Will my pack accept a human Luna by my side? 2. Will I be able to protect her from the threats that are sure to come our way as soon as word of my human mate got out into the world?